We don't live in a small mud hut, and we don't have lions outside of our house.
In my first year in Tanzania, I watched 150 children die, most of them in front of me, and then I stopped counting. Didn't even get to the end of the year, and I stopped recording the deaths. It was an average of 2, 3, sometimes 4 children a week.
I wasn't necessarily always there for the deaths of these children, but sometimes I had a child who was doing well, and then I come back the next day and the bed was empty.
It was a path and a journey we had to walk to understand what are the multiple layers behind these problems before we would be prepared to, even in the most simple way, propose changes and solutions.
Welcome to the One Pebble podcast. Listeners, thank you for joining us. YouTube watchers, we are grateful. Today is a very special day. It brings me great joy. It is a tremendous honor to introduce to you Dr. Steve and Jodi Swanson. Thank you so much for saying yes to the One Pebble podcast. Dr. Steve and Jodi have just completed 12 years of medical missions in Tanzania. They have 3 adult children, Hannah, Cademan, in India, that I couldn't be more proud of. And when I look at these two, I get emotional because I'm so proud of who they are, the work that they've done in Africa. They've truly been the hands and feet of the Lord. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve and Jodi, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Has it been fun to be back in the U.S.? Here you are in Spicer, Minnesota. You're leaving back for Africa in just a couple days.
Yep.
Have you had a good time back in the U.S.?
I have. It's always good to reconnect with family. My dad is 91 years old, and have time with him to speak at churches, to have family vacation with our kids up in Canada, and to meet with friends and sponsors. It's been a valuable month for me.
Yeah, it's always good to be back, especially at Green Lake Spicer, to see Mom and the family. So my mom is almost 85. She's 84 right now, and it's a blessing to be in her home and to be with her and be with my family. And as Steve mentioned, the kids, so we had a vacation. We went up to Canada and did a fishing vacation with the 3 kids, and that was the first that we've been together as a family since last August. So I was really looking forward to that. We had some days together.
I'd love you to tell the listeners about your 3 adult children who I think the world of.
So do we. So Hannah is in her 2nd year at University of Minnesota Veterinary School. She's a graduate from St. Olaf and then went on to veterinary work. She wants to do wildlife, be a wildlife vet. And this past summer, she was in South Africa doing research with Cape Buffalo and loved it. Her time in Africa, growing up in Tanzania, has had a very direct effect on her career choice. You want to talk about
She loves being in the bush.
Yeah.
We call being in the bush where you're out among the wildlife of Africa. And even when she was in South Africa, she was involved in a dehorning project for rhinos. Rhinoceros, of course, are being poached at exceedingly high numbers, leading to potential extinction of them. And so the one way to stop poaching is to remove their horn. So she was involved in dehorning of over 100 rhinos in the Kruger National Park area of South Africa. And it was really, really amazing to see the videos of her being a 5'2", blonde-haired Minnesota girl, removing the horn of a sedated rhino that's laying on the ground, probably 10 times her size, or maybe not quite. But Cademan, our middle child, is 22 years old. He is studying computer engineering at University of Madison. He's doing an internship right now at a company. He's really interested in the manufacturing processes of computer chips. So he's potentially interested in going into the world of computer chip manufacturing and its usages in artificial intelligence. He's a smart boy who digests complex calculus equations over breakfast. I can't understand what's going on in his brain, but he's happy.
Our Harris, when Cademan and Harris were younger, they had opportunities to play together, and Harris was always just amazed at the brain of Cademan, and not only is he so smart, but he has a heart of gold.
Yeah, he loves the outdoors. He spends all of his weekends and all of his free time high altitude mountaineering. He does rock climbing. We've managed to convince him to be roped in when he does it and not to do free climbing. He does a lot of highlining. He's constantly pushing his physical body to the limits. Yeah, and that's I think how he decompresses. So he loves the outdoors. He loves risk and adventure. He loves computer engineering.
I'm so proud of him. Tell us a little bit about what India is doing.
So India has just graduated. So she's 19 years old. She graduated and took a gap year. And in her gap year, she spent time, she's interested in environmental conservation, similar to Hannah in that way, and went to Vietnam, worked with pangolins there, worked in one of the national parks of Vietnam. And she traveled down to Cape Town, worked in the Cape Town Aquarium, mostly working with penguins and turtles conservation. And then she did some time working on organic farms in France and solidifying her French. So that was one of her goals there. She is now at Lewis and Clark College out in Portland, Oregon, studying biology and environmental conservation. Yeah. And part of the reason she chose that place was because most of the campus is in a forest. So she really loves the outdoors also. And she was 7 years old when we moved to Tanzania. So Tanzania has probably had the biggest effect, lasting effect on her. She would go barefoot if she could everywhere she went.
You have such courageous and brave and down-to-earth, kind kids. I've had the opportunity from time to time to get to know them, and I'm just so proud of what your adult kids are doing. But when I look at you two, and I feel a little bit nervous today, and I'll tell you why. I have so much reverence for both of you. I've known you both for over 30 years. Jodi and my husband, Jamie, are cousins. And I've had the opportunity to watch you from afar, spend a little bit of time with you, but mostly watch you from afar. And I'm going to try not to cry today. But I meant it when I said it at the beginning. You truly, truly have been the hands and feet of Christ, doing kingdom work across the world. And when I think of both of you, I think of, number one, your hearts. You're very humble. You're very servant-minded. You're selfless. Both of you are incredibly intelligent, and you're just wonderful, down-to-earth, give back people that you think of the world before you think of yourself. And you've inspired so many people. You've educated so many people. And to think of deciding to pick up and move to Tanzania is bravery and being courageous, far greater than most of us can understand. But when I think of your parents, our sympathy to you, Dr. Swanson, and the recent passing of your delightful mom, Jean. She loved the Dairy Queen. And I love the Dairy Queen. You had a mom to be so proud of, and your dad, Alan, is still alive. I knew your dad, Norm, well, Jodi, and he was an amazing man, and we miss him. Your mom, Val, who I think the absolute world of. But here's what I know about your late parents and parents still on this earth. They taught you to be concerned about fulfilling the Great Commission. I'm going to say that one more time. Oh, I've got goosebumps as I say it. Your parents taught you to be concerned about fulfilling the Great Commission. Now I'm going to try to be quiet for the rest of the podcast, but I say that because here you are living across the world. And again, people aren't better than people. We can do kingdom work right here in the United States, just as important. But very few people do what you do. Very few people pick up and move to a different country that's exciting and can be difficult to serve. And we're so grateful for what you're doing. I want you to tell us a little bit about your childhood and a little bit of how you ended up deciding you're going to go to Tanzania. But I want to say before that, Dr. Steve Swanson, as I read on your bio, you are a pediatrician and infectious disease tropical medicine physician working in northern Tanzania, as we said, since 2013. You graduated from Harvard Medical School. I'd like to talk about that for 2 hours. I can't imagine graduating from Harvard Medical School.
It's overrated.
And then we have Jodi, who I'm equally proud of. She has a doctorate in nursing. She went to Wheaton College, the same as our Elsie, and went on to further studying. I'm just so incredibly proud of you. And something else I'm so proud of that we're going to talk about later in the podcast is in 2023, both of you established the Institute for Child Healthcare Africa. It's registered as a nonprofit in the United States and non-governmental organization in Tanzania. It is charged to continuing the advancement of neonatology training across Africa. Listeners, you're in for an absolute treat today. Let's start with your childhood. I know that you grew up in a missionary family, Dr. Swanson. Tell us about growing up in the family you did and what that felt like and how you decided to go to medical school. And Jodi, we'd like to hear the same from you.
Well, I think sometimes we walk in the legacy of our parents. Sometimes we veer from their legacy. Both of those are true in my case, in the sense that walking in my parents' legacy, my parents decided to go on the mission field when my father was in seminary in the United States, and my mom had received a call to work with the Chinese when she was in junior high. She heard a returning missionary speak in her Lutheran church in Duluth, Minnesota. And this woman, Lenora Erickson, spoke about missions work in China and then later in Taiwan after China fell to communism. And it inspired my mom. And as a 14, 15-year-old young Christian, she said, I want to do the same. And fast forward, when my father, after they were married, was in seminary, she was fervently praying that my dad would agree to be a missionary. And one day he was preaching on the Great Commission, and he felt this deep conviction within his heart that he had to do more than just preach about it. And he came home and told my mom that he was seriously considering being a missionary, to which she stood on the bed and jumped up and down in joy, hooting and hollering, because this had been the prayer of her heart. And if you know my mom, she was like about 5 feet on a good day, but carried a lot of enthusiasm and fire inside of her. We used to call her Mighty Mouse in a respectful way. So my parents in 1962, with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old, having never been outside the United States before, not even to Canada or to Mexico. In 1962, they boarded a steamer ship in the San Francisco Bay Harbor and spent 3 weeks in second-class cabin, traveling across the Pacific Ocean, eventually arriving in Taiwan, where they served for 28 years. And I look back, that's where I was made in Taiwan. My sister, Julie, who's older than me, was born in Taiwan. My parents raised 5 kids in Asia. I stayed in Taiwan till I was 18 years old. It was home for me. And what it taught me was several things. One of which was that the world is an exciting place, and a world that should not be feared, but should be celebrated. Differences are not bad. Differences can be good. whether it's language, food, culture, and that the things that separate us are less as a human race than the things that unite us. And I discovered growing up with Chinese friends, even those who were Buddhist and maybe of a different religion, that we still found humor and we laughed and we cried and we could talk about things. So as a young adult, I wanted desperately to live overseas as my parents had. Where I diverged from them is that I decided to go into medicine. Nobody on either side of my family had ever done anything based out of the sciences or medicine. There wasn't a physician or a nurse on either side of the family on my mom or dad's side. So I was the first to sort of go into that realm of healthcare. And I did that because I believe that medicine is a universal language, that cultures are different around the world. Health practices are different, but the human body is the same. The brain, the kidneys, the lungs, the heart, the muscles, the nervous system, they work the same, whether you're in Cameroon, Africa, or Bangladesh, Asia, Peru, or United States. And so it was a given that I was going to do pediatrics. I fell in love with children as the youngest of 5 very early on. I was a given that I wanted to work overseas, but we'll get to how that door came to go to Tanzania. And it was a given that I wanted to walk in my parents' legacy of really loving on people that are different from myself, approaching them with grace and humility and kindness. I think my parents modeled for me that more important than intelligence and more important than accomplishments is approaching people with understanding and kindness. I grew up in a grace-filled Christian home, and there was never divisions around theology or church denomination, and I'm so grateful for that in a world today that is divided on so many levels, politically and theologically. Grace was and permeated our home. And that is a message that Jodi and I wanted to carry into our married lives and into our lives as medical missionaries. And you can talk about your childhood, Jodi, which was spectacular.
So very unlike Steve's childhood, I grew up in the Minnesota Prairie, right? Little town of Princeburg, extended family, both sets of grandparents in the town, which I loved. And but my parents also had a deep desire to be involved in fulfilling the Great Commission and what was their part of it. So my dad and my mom encouraged us, all of us kids, to go overseas to do a short-term mission. What happened for me was I fell in love with it. So each time I went, I had a greater desire to do more. So the first time, and actually my parents took us to Ecuador when I was in 8th grade, and at the invitation of Steve Saint, who was living here at that time in Wilmer. And that was my first experience of, this is different. But I enjoyed it. I loved the differences, loved the different culture. So even as a young person, I enjoyed that. Then each stage of my journey, I went a little bit longer, a little bit further distance. And you might not know this, but we share a love also for the Philippines, because I went to the Philippines when I was at Wheaton College between my junior and senior year. I was a bio major, but I was interested in healthcare. I was interested probably more in public health and nutrition. And when I went to the Philippines and I was working at Smoky Mountain in Balut, which is a squatter settlement of like 10,000 people or more, I loved what I was doing. I was so happy. And here I was on top of a garbage dump, but we were meeting these people, making, relationships with the people who lived there. And it was a joyous time for me. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I was created to do. It was, for me, I call it an epiphany of, now I know why I'm here in this world, to care for the poor in this type of manner, doing healthcare. So that switched my career, and I went then to Case Western to do more training, but specifically in nursing. So I did pediatric nursing at Case Western with a goal to go back overseas. And before I went to Case Western, I had gone actually to Australia to do discipleship training school. While I was there and had a chance to go to Papua New Guinea, another important time for me of going, I love this. I mean, the people, so different from me, but so interesting. And I just had a heart to be in these places, and felt really during that time, the thing that changed it for me was understanding that God made me this way and God loved me. And I think actually I would want the listeners to know this, that understanding the love of God for me was that whatever he asked me to do was going to be the best for me because of his love for me. And so if God asked me to go to the other side of the world, I would go because that was the best place for me to be. And I was going to be the happiest following his will. And so I remember very clearly during that time saying, God, I will go anywhere you want me to go for as long as you call me, and do whatever you ask me to do. And I'm ready for it. And I said to him, because I thought maybe the place I would least want to go would be a place like India. So I prayed, God, even if you call me to India, I will go. Not knowing that he was going to do that. But when I ended up in India, so after my training, I went to India and ready to do whatever, live in this place that was going to be hot and crowded and not the easiest place for me, but I thought this is where I'm going to go. And on our outreach, I didn't understand it at that time, but on our outreach for the medical work that we were doing, I ended up in the Himalayan mountains of North India, probably one of the most beautiful places I have ever been in my life. And it fit me perfectly. And I thought, not only, and God called me to something and I said, yes, whatever it is. And then he gave me something beautiful that he knew I would do, a place he knew I would do well in. So that's how I ended up in India. I was there for 4 years before I came back to the States, where I did some more Bible training, and then I met Steve. And then my course was redirected. Our course was redirected. So that brings us to, we met, we married.
How did you two meet? Remind me.
This is a very long story.
Oh, that's a separate podcast.
Yeah,
that is literally a 45-minute story. Yeah. If you don't believe in God,
can you give us the 30-second version?
But the 30-second version is his dad became a minister and was preaching at North Heights Lutheran Church, and Steve was in Rwanda at that time, or shortly after. He was writing a letter. He was there shortly after the genocide. That's another podcast for you. And his dad was reading a letter about the work Steve was doing in Rwanda, and my sister Pam was sitting in the audience, and she heard it and said, this could be a perfect match for my sister Jodi, who is out in India. So Pam was our matchmaker. So that started the ball rolling, and eventually we met. Even our mothers were involved in this setup. Yeah, but it was a match that was made in heaven. It was God's plan, not ours.
It's so clear looking at you two and watching you, like I said, for over 30 years. You're fascinating. God absolutely knew what he was doing. You guys are an incredible couple and doing amazing work. What brought you to Tanzania? How did you decide? So you got married and you both had this heart for missions. And why did you choose Tanzania? And I have to say to you, I only scratched the surface. God willing, I can't wait to go back and I want to visit you guys. So I'm wearing this. What is this called again?
This is a shuka, a Maasai shuka.
A Maasai shuka. My husband and son and I had the opportunity to go to Kenya and Uganda this past January of 2025. And I love this thing. It's warm, it's beautiful, it's bright. But my heart, we fell in love with Africa. We fell in love with Africa. How did you decide, of all the places you could have gone in the world, how did you decide Tanzania?
Well, we had familiarity with Africa. After Jodi and I got married, we decided to take a year before I started my pediatric residency program, which was in the Bay Area of California. And during that year off, we visited India and the area that Jodi worked in. We went up to Tibet, where she had always dreamed of traveling through.
We also went to Taiwan.
We went to Taiwan, and I showed her my childhood home of 16 plus years. And then we went to Kenya, and we worked at a mission hospital called Kajabi Medical Centre, just north of Nairobi in Kenya, for 4 months. And I was volunteering as a young doctor just fresh out of medical school. It was while we were in Kenya that I went through the match process and matched at Children's Hospital in Oakland. So we moved back to the States, and I started my pediatric residency program. And we both had, when we married, had this shared desire to do international long-term work. And we thought that that would happen quickly. But as things went, 3 years of pediatric residency training turned into 4th year with a chief residency year, turned into 5 years as I was a NICU hospitalist at Stanford, turned into 8 years as I did pediatric infectious disease training, and then spent 2 years working for the CDC in epidemiology, stationed at Minnesota Department of Health, but as a CDC employee.
All the while, I'm praying, Lord, when?
Yes.
When are we going to get back overseas?
And by the time I had finished my academic training, I was in my late 30s. Well, you have a lot of med school loans. You have a lot of debt. You've been delaying and deferring a full income while you're in training for a long time. So I joined Hennepin Country Medical Centre staff, HCMC, for those of you that live in Minnesota. It's a large trauma hospital, one of the largest in central United States. And there I was the inpatient pediatric medical director at HCMC. We looked hard and long at opportunities to go overseas. We went to Cambodia on 2 occasions where an invitation was extended to us, and to Laos. And we looked at places in Guatemala and Peru. And we were looking in India as well.
We looked a lot in India and Nepal, because every time he came home with an idea of a place to go, I'd be like, oh no. Like if it was even Africa, looking for opportunities in Africa, I would run up to the computer and go on and say, isn't there some pediatric work to do in Nepal? Because my heart was so much in that region at that time.
Yes. In fact, that's why our youngest daughter is named India, because Jodi wanted a little bit of India.
Always with me.
Always with her, yes. So we've, and then in 2022, I led a team of 2 doctors out to Arusha, Tanzania, to do 6 weeks at a mission hospital, a Lutheran mission hospital in northern Tanzania. And at that time, Jodi came along, and we had our 3 little kids in tow as we landed in Arusha. We met a man, Mark Jacobson, a missionary doctor born and raised in Stillwater, Minnesota, who had been working in Africa for over 30 years at that point in Tanzania. And he had started this hospital and another one. And while we were with him, he discovered that he knew my aunt. My aunt, my father's sister, had been a missionary for 40 years in Tanzania. So my dad was in Taiwan, Asia, and my aunt, his sister, was in Tanzania for 40 years under the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. And Mark Jacobson quickly realized that what he had in Jodi and I was a couple that were passionate about missions, had a track record in it, and there was a connection on my side of the family to Tanzania. And before we left Tanzania, he put together a job description and a proposal for us to go to Africa. And he submitted it to the Lutheran Church to fund us as medical missionaries. Well, we weren't sure we wanted to commit to going to Tanzania. After all, we were both focused on Asia, particularly South Asia. And, well, I wasn't necessarily sold on the idea of working at a Lutheran hospital. Jodi and I at that point weren't wedded to the idea of being at a mission hospital. And furthermore, there was a huge salary cut that we realized we were going to have to take. We were going to earn about 20% of what we were currently earning, which brought up anxiety in me about how are we going to financially survive in Africa on this income? And what about student loans, medical student loans I was still repaying? What about saving for our kids' colleges? So anxiety started to fill me, and I started to get second thoughts about this opportunity to move to Africa. And that's where Jodi stepped in, God bless her, and said something that was a game changer.
Well, I said, I think we need to take this opportunity. If we take this opportunity, we will never regret it. We can always come back in 2 years. So our commitment was for 2 years. And I said, I think that we need to take this or we will forever regret it. Because we had been looking for and praying for an opportunity. And here was one right in front of us.
So she said, we can always return after our 2-year contract. But if we don't take this opportunity, we'll forever regret it.
Yeah.
And this was in 2012.
Yeah.
And 15 months after that initial 6-week visit, 15, 18 months, I had resigned from Hennepin Country Medical Centre as the physician there. We had packed up, stored, sold, or brought with us what we had. We had taken our 3 children, ages 7, 10, and 13, out of their public schools, and we were moving to Africa. And right as we were getting ready to move to Africa, our 3 little kids decided to have a riot on our hands, and they said, we're not going.
Well, when we actually said to them that they were the first people we talked to, of course, and said, we decided we're going to go to Africa. And Hannah was the one who said, I'm not going. I'm going to stay with Uncle Ben. And both Cademan and India said, good idea. And so they were all going to stay back with Uncle Ben. And
true mutiny. 3 kids, 7, 10, and 13, who had decided
revolt on their hands.
Who had decided for themselves that mom and dad can go to Africa, but we're going to go live uninvited with our uncle.
That is hilarious. But then, I could just see them. Those 3 smart, strong-willed, spirited hearts of gold. I could just see those 3. Spirited, and that's a compliment, correct. By the way.
I know. But so then what Hannah did was said...
This is the vet student, by the way.
She said, however, if we were each able to get a dog, we would reconsider. We would come. So we'll come if we can each have our own dog. And we, knowing our situation that we were going into, knowing that we were going to need dogs, guard dogs at the house, we said, okay, you can each have your own dog. So that's how we got our kids to move to Africa.
Oh my goodness. That's precious. So, they each
of course, we also love dogs.
Yeah, we're an animal-loving family, which fits us well because Tanzania has the largest concentration of mammals in the world. It's where the Serengeti is, in large, beautiful areas of open land with wildlife. So we moved to Tanzania in 2013.
And I'll say one of the reasons that we moved to Tanzania also, after being in Asia, going and looking at other opportunities, what we really needed was a place that Steve was going to be able to work, a place that I was going to be able to work and be happy, and good education available for our kids. And we were unable to find that in Cambodia. We were unable to find things that fit our whole family. So when we looked at this, we wanted to make sure our children were going to be able to get a good education so that they would not be hindered in their future, that this was not going to set them back. And so this place was perfect for us. It had work that I could do that I was interested in, and Steve, and room to grow, and a a nice place, a nice school for our kids.
An international English-speaking school.
I'm so excited to talk about your current work and all the arms and projects that you're working on. But tell us what it's like to live in Tanzania. Is there a way to kind of explain life in general?
First of all, we don't live in a small mud hut, and we don't have lions outside of our house. Many people actually ask that, but it's very different from that, though there are lions about an hour and a half away from us in the national parks. But our home it's not like the homes here in America, but it's similar in that we have a 3-bedroom house with land outside. The place that we got actually has a lot of land because I really like to garden. So it's beautiful. It's we have our struggles of getting electricity or water, those sorts of things, but we're not carrying water, So we live in some ways much like people would live here.
The roads are very different. There's often dirt roads instead of paved roads. There'll be goats and cows, Maasai herders that'll be crossing the roads. There are motorcycles and small minivans that they call dala-dalas, packed with people. That is their local form of bus transportation. It's a vibrant, colorful country. Tanzania is a very warm country, so it sits right below the equator. So in June, July, August, that's our winter time. It has 60 million people. It's growing at a very fast clip. It has one of the highest population growths in the world. Geographically, it's a big country. People don't realize or appreciate when they look at a globe how large some of these countries are that are close to the equator. You could fit the entire west coast of the United States, Washington, Oregon, and California, as well as the state of Minnesota in the square miles of Tanzania. If I want to drive from one part of Tanzania to the other, it could take me 2 days. Some of it would be on paved roads, some of it would be on dirt roads. Life is an adventure. There is an unpredictability from day to day to a lot of things, whether it's, do we have utilities today? What's the grocery situation like? But it is an amazing country. There's a lot of things about Tanzania that are similar to the States in terms of like the warmth and the friendliness. I think America is a very friendly country. People tell us that oftentimes when they've come to the United States. But there are many things that are different. People's values there are very communal, less individualistic. There's a much greater concern about when you communicate with people that you never show irritation or frustration. It's a face-saving culture. It's very respectful of older people and elderly. There's a kindness there. And I would say when Jodi and I went to Tanzania, we did not have a God complex that, this is a country that is poor, resource limited, and needs us from America. No, we knew that we would be the ones to benefit from Tanzania and that it would give us far more than we could ever possibly imagine or give it back. And I would say 12 years in, starting our 13th year, that Tanzania has made me a better human being, a better and smarter, wiser physician. It has changed my heart for the better, I believe, my style and practice of medicine. It has given me so much. And in terms of resources, it's rich in resources. There are so many people in Tanzania. So if you think of resources purely in terms of like monetary wealth or equipment, supplies, okay, maybe it doesn't have that to the level of Western countries or Europe, but it has a different kind of resources, human resources, talent in the people. And the greatest joy for me, and we'll probably address this later, has been the opportunity to just make so many friends with young Tanzanian doctors and nurses and older ones, and to watch them grow in their clinical abilities. So Tanzania is an adventurous country. It's a beautiful, warm, welcoming country, and it gives to the person who goes there far more than it receives from those of us who have gone.
You both are so humble, and to hear you say that the country has been far greater of a gift to you than you could have been to the country or the people, that just speaks to the hearts of who you are and the servant-minded people that you are. God clearly called you there. It's so obvious to me and everyone around you that's watching you. And we're so thankful for your yes to the Lord to go there and serve. Tell us how you had a heart for pediatrics and kind of why you do what you do, and tell us what your current work looks like. We'd love to just listen for your heart for pediatrics, your heart for medical care, and what is it like over there, and what is your current work that you're working on? I know you guys have several projects, and we're excited to hear about all of them.
So when we first arrived in Tanzania, we had the foolishness to think we were going to do A, B, and C. I was going to develop a residency program in the hospital. I'm working at a teaching training hospital. I've always been in residency medical training institutions. So, I'll start a residency program. I'll do research in antibiotic resistance and antimicrobial trends, which antibiotics are working, which are not in the African context. And I'll do hospital inpatient care and infrastructure capacity building. So I had my mental list, and I was blindsided because some of what I thought I would do, the teaching and the training, yes, but very quickly when we landed, there were two things we were facing, and that was unprecedented and unexpected numbers of children dying from severe acute malnutrition, where these children go weeks to months in a place of nutritional deficiency. And so they would come in susceptible to diseases and impaired in their ability to grow or even in their brain development because of malnutrition. Most of that was children under age 5. And then the second group was babies born unprepared to be living in this world, typically premature babies, but small and sick babies. In my first year in Tanzania, I watched 150 children die, most of them in front of me, and then I stopped counting. Didn't even get to the end of the year, and I stopped recording the deaths. It was an average of 2, 3, sometimes 4 children a week that would pass away, which, coming from the United States, even at Hennepin Country Medical Centre, you just don't see those numbers. Most physicians are in a community practice will not even have one pediatric death in a year, and here it was over 150 in one. And it was frankly traumatizing. I had lived in Rwanda and worked there during this latter half of the genocide. I had been in India and Philippines and worked for an organization that Mother Teresa started. I thought, prepared, also time in South Africa and Kenya to work in an African context. But when you go and you stay, and that return trip back to the United States is not there, and you've left your job, it's like there's not a way out of this. This is my new reality. And either I have to find a way to adjust my expectations and maybe incrementally, slowly bring changes, lowering the death rate and improving the outcomes, or I'm going to burn out. And I think a year plus into our journey, Jodi and I were feeling rather traumatized, if I may say, by the amount of death that we were facing, particularly in the child malnutrition ward. And so that's when Jodi can share a little bit about how we started a feeding program. And then I'll speak to the NICU because those lessons learned feed into what we're doing now. It was a path and a journey we had to walk to understand what are the multiple layers behind these problems before we would be prepared to, even in the most simple way, propose changes and solutions. Do you want to speak about the work that you're doing in malnutrition, and I can come back to the NICU?
Yeah. So when we first moved to Tanzania, because we had 3 children and adjusting to life there, I worked part-time and Steve was full-time. So I was given the opportunity to go to Sullivan Hospital and see where I could fit in. What would I like to do? I had a lot of flexibility. And so when I went there, found the number of children that were malnourished was so high. More than 50% of children hospitalized had malnutrition as an underlying comorbidity. So that was where I saw I could make a difference. And I worked alongside someone who was already doing that work. And I didn't want to come in and try to start a program on my own. Wanted to work alongside somebody and slowly bring about change. And there was a time after, I think it was close to Christmas, wasn't it?
About a year in.
Yeah, when there was another death, and I knew it was from the refeeding syndrome, which is giving a child too many calories, jump-starting their metabolism, and it can cause a change in the body that produces death. And I had seen it a number of times, and I felt, okay, this is enough. I walked alongside enough. I can't watch another child. And I wasn't necessarily always there for the deaths of these children, but sometimes I had a child who was doing well, and then I come back the next day and the bed was empty. And I'm like, what happened? And it was really hard. It was very, very difficult for me. And so I went and did some research online, talking with Steve, trying to figure out what can we do different, and found a formula, a recipe online that was being used in India for refeeding of malnourished children. And through that process, in my kitchen, I went and bought a kitchen scale, and I weighed and measured and worked out a formula and put together a protocol and started to do this in the hospital with the people we were working with. And I felt like I didn't want to impose my own ideas. But what I found is they were very receptive and very open and welcomed it. And so working alongside the team there, we have developed a very good feeding protocol for the malnourished children, and based on local resources. And so we make our own formula. We did a lot of training of the staff. And now that program is going really well.
And that program has cut the number of deaths from refeeding syndrome, giving the child the wrong kind of food at the wrong rate. It has cut the number of deaths from over 100 per year to down to probably less than 10 per year, maybe less than 4.
For a while, more recently, we had hardly had any deaths, and the program was going really well. I did a lot of quality assurance then, coming in and making sure, like every 3 months you get new interns that come in. And so just making sure that everybody understood the protocol, that it was up front and center. So I do a lot of that. But more recently, just before I came home in June, we had a number of deaths. And it was traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And I will finish by saying it. I understood by that time that I was at the bedside when one of these children passed, and it just hit me really hard. And it was a little child with Down syndrome, and I had grown very fond of him, adored him, and he was doing better and better each day. And then it was a sudden change and hard for me to handle. And through that time, I came to realize, I'm in a place of cumulative stress here. trauma stress, which is one of the reasons why when we came back this past summer, I spent a little bit more time home. And I'm still working on things, still working on how to, I don't know, I've been very resilient over all these years, but I have a new vulnerability that I've become aware of. And so I may, in going back this next time, make some changes in just my own work, looking at where I'm at and what I'm capable of doing. And I have now taken, I'm just going to say this now, but I've made a switch in my practice to maybe going into lactation consulting, something I've always been interested in, always loved. And there's an opening to do that in the NICU and in different places, perhaps some more hopeful work. So I hope to work alongside the feeding program and continue to see it support it. But I might be making some fine adjustments in my work and doing something new that gives me just maybe a little more of a change in my career. We'll see where that goes. And this brings me back to what Steve was saying too, is when we went, that we had to be very flexible about where is it that the Lord needs our work. Where do we need to shift our skills, our talents, our focus to fit the needs of this community where they're at? And so even in this stage that we're at in life, I'm also thinking, okay, maybe there's a different direction here for me. Maybe I need to switch and use my skills and my giftings in a different manner. So flexibility is something that we have both been called upon to take hold of in Tanzania. You have to be very flexible. Even some days when you have an idea, this is what I'm going to do today, and then suddenly, oh, we have no water. Oh, I need to make an adjustment here with my plan for the day. So flexibility, this is not something that I was gifted with. I like to be planned. I like to know the plan ahead of time. But Tanzania has taught me and transformed me, you might say, in that area where I needed to learn to be more flexible. So that is a gift the country has given me through those challenges.
I'm a missionary kid. That was part of my DNA.
Yeah, well, part of my DNA is Duininck, and it's a very planned, isn't it? We have our plans.
So Jodi worked, and did amazing work with children with severe malnutrition, and we waited a year before we started to bring about suggested changes. And by then, they knew us. They knew we weren't just us. Here today, gone tomorrow. They knew we weren't returning back when things got hard, that we were there to stay. And then they just welcomed the changes that we created that reduced the number of hospital errors. And our death rate, as I said, dropped 90+%. I estimate that there's well over a few thousand children who have come through the feeding program and survived. And we give God credit for that and the amazing team of Tanzanian nurses, primarily nurses, and some doctors who have worked with us. But they had to know us, and they had to know that we were there, and that even when the hospital was making mistakes, as they still make, hospital medical errors contribute to large percentages of childhood deaths in low-income countries like Tanzania. It's the mistakes that kill the child as much as the diseases do. Even in those mistakes, that we were still going to be with them and not lose our temper or walk out of the room or ever publicly shame them. If I have a nurse or doctor who's doing something wrong, and I've watched mistakes to the point where they are so wrong that a single error could potentially kill a small baby, that even in those mistakes, that I'll take them away privately and I'll talk about it, never publicly shaming them. So while that was going on, I stepped into a tiny little room that they rather generously had called our NICU, which stands for Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. And it was a room that had about 15 babies in it. There was no nurses or doctors working in that room. It was crowded with broken equipment and babies in cots, largely unattended, uncared for. And 1 out of roughly every 3 of those babies statistically was not going to get discharged. They would pass away. So the mortality rate was 30%. And the hospital director said, Dr. Swanson, you have worked in neonatology before. I even had considered becoming a neonatologist, but had pivoted to pediatric infectious disease as subspecialty training. He said, would you like to take and be the medical director of the NICU? The hospital had been built with a focus on medicine, surgery, obstetrics, and pediatrics, but nobody had ever given thought to, well, what do we do when a baby is born small or premature or in respiratory distress, jaundiced or sepsis? And so I stepped into that room, and it was really hard because in my first year there, like I said, 1 out of every 3 to 4 babies was going to die. And we weren't even trying to save the small ones. We went about a long process of creating a culture change. Yes, we got new equipment and we wrote protocols, but the thing that really made the difference is when I started to bring NICU nurse instructors. The first 2 were Mary and Louise from Southern California, 2 lovely Christian NICU nurses coming from Pasadena, California area, who came and just loved on our NICU nurses in Tanzania and really worked with them to change the culture from being reactive, waiting for a problem, and then jumping up out of your chair to being proactive and anticipatory. Because in being anticipatory, we head off a problem before it happens. We don't wait for the baby to crash from respiratory failure, but we support their breathing with sequential steps before they get into difficulty. And once the nursing culture changed and the nurses became empowered, elevated in their status, believing that their efforts was what was going to make the difference of a baby's survival, it wasn't written in the will of God. And our doctors became trained in the basics of neonatology and learned to communicate with the nurses as teammates, not in a patriarchal ordering them around way that is so commonplace in African hospitals. In other words, the doctors came down a few notches, the nurses were elevated several notches, and thirdly, and perhaps just as important, we got the mothers into the rooms caring for their small hospitalized babies. They became recruited as almost second nurses for their babies, holding them skin to skin, doing the feedings, expressing their breast milk and feeding it through a oral gastric tube. Once we engaged the mothers, we created a culture with the doctors that was much more transparent. We elevated the status of the nurses. Our survival rate in the NICU went from around 70% survival to 94%. And not just that, but our survival rate for babies born under 2.2 pounds or 1,000 grams, what we call extremely low birth weight babies, went from around 20% to almost 90%. In fact, we started to have so many small premature babies survive that people began to travel to our hospital from long distances, believing that we were making up our statistics. In government meetings, we were told to lie and report more deaths than we had actually experienced because our survival rates for the smallest of the premature babies were on an order of 20 times what government hospitals were achieving. And of course, we didn't want to make the government hospitals look bad, but on the other hand, we were experiencing a renaissance of newborn survival. And why is that important? Because prematurity today is the leading cause of childhood death under the age of 5 in the world. More children are going to die in the first 5 years of their life from being born premature and the complications thereof of their prematurity than are going to die from pneumonia or diarrhea or meningitis or infections or malaria or HIV or any other cause. And if you put prematurity together with also newborn infections we call sepsis and birth asphyxia, baby's not getting enough oxygen during the time of delivery or immediately after, birth asphyxia, sepsis, and especially prematurity, those three together are the leading cause of death, full stop, in Africa. In America, it's heart attacks. That's what kills most people, probably followed by strokes, then followed by various types of cancer. In Africa, not so. It's neonatal diseases. 10% of all Africans are going to die in the immediate newborn period. 10%. So we were walking into a landmine and a gold mine, in the sense that we were experiencing death all around us that my eyes were becoming open to. And as an infectious disease doctor, I trained to treat children with TB and HIV and malaria, and that's not what they're dying of. They were dying in the newborn period. But it was a gold mine, because if we could figure out how to, in a low-tech, low-cost way, save these babies, then we could replicate that across Africa and thereby address the leading cause of death, period, and for sure the leading cause of pediatric death. So we developed a NICU in 2015, and it just took off. And our census was almost doubling each year, the first years. We were so busy that we were turning away patients and babies because we were full. Families would drive for 8 hours with a baby skin to skin against the mother because they had heard about this hospital, Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, that had a neonatal intensive care unit that could save their babies. And we started to see women coming in who had lost 5 and 6 babies in a row, each born at a different hospital in the hopes that that hospital could save the next child that the woman had, each time going into unexplained preterm labor, and each time the baby dying. And on the 6th or 7th baby, they would come into our NICU and we would save the baby. And it would be not that difficult because of the culture change and the protocols and some of the equipment. And we would do it at a 1/1000th the cost of what it costs in the United States. We can hospitalize a critically ill newborn baby in our NICU for roughly about $50 a day. In an American NICU, it could be upwards to $40,000 a day for one day. Now, we're not like an American NICU, but we were figuring out a low-cost, low-tech way to save babies. And remarkably so, we weren't using mechanical ventilators. Our NICU today still has no mechanical ventilators. Our most expensive piece of equipment might be an oxygen monitor or a refurbished secondhand incubator. We do a lot of it without equipment. In that time, we decided we were going to put our protocols together into a handbook, and they were going to just be for our doctors to use. So we put all those loose sheets of papers and all of the protocols we had written, protocols written in the trenches of an African hospital, not a book written in America for Africa, but a book written by Africans and in an African hospital for the African continent. And it just started to grow. And this book we have a small version for the doctors and we have a bigger version for the NICU unit. And we put it into a book. And it was just meant for our hospital. Then we started to get other hospitals saying, well, we heard you have a NICU handbook. It's the first one ever written by an East African hospital. Could we have a copy of it? Well, could we have a copy? Could we have a copy? And before we knew it, we were printing them locally and sending them out to different hospitals. And today, this NICU book that is called Every Breath Counts, the Manual of Neonatal Care and Drug Doses, written by myself and some lovely colleagues of mine. One is a NICU nurse, Lisa, from Winnipeg, Canada, and one is a lovely doctor working at Baylor, who is also, both of them are Christians, Kendra Martinez. This book is now being used in over 20 African countries and in over 200 hospitals. Even today, I got a request from an American doctor working in Togo, West Africa, if he could please get a copy of the book. we sent it to Mongolia, halfway around the world from little Arusha, Tanzania, and put 25 copies or 30 copies into the government hospitals. And now they're translating it into Mongolian, wanting to use it as part of their guidelines. And that was thrilling to me. It was unexpected, but it fit with who I am, which is, if I figure out something, if my team and I figure out something, why keep it to ourselves? Let's get these protocols, these guidelines out to as many hospitals as we can. Let's be an educator. So around the time that we wrote this book, we decided to run what was called Tiny Feet, Big Steps, Advancing Care of Critically Ill and Premature Babies in Africa conference. And this was our brochure from 2024, the last conference. And this conference, which we started after COVID, was intended just to attract local hospitals to learn best practices, evidence-based practices, low-tech practices, low-technology practices to help newborns survive in their hospital. Let's help you develop your NICU in advance and improve upon your survival rate, but not just surviving, but thriving. How can we get these babies to reach their full neurodevelopmental potential while in the NICU and after the NICU? And so we started the conference, and boy, did that conference explode. So much so that within the second or third year, we had become the largest clinical training neonatology conference in all of Africa. And this year, we're hosting our 5th conference in November. It's 6 days. We bring 50 pediatricians, neonatologists, and NICU nurse instructors from around the globe, African countries and non-African countries. In the United States, places like Vanderbilt and Harvard and UCSD and LA Children's, University of Washington, of course, University of Minnesota, send people that I'm connected to. And we estimate that we'll probably have over 300 people there, instructors and trainees from over 20 African countries. And when we count the last 4 years, we've trained 640 African doctors and nurses across 159 hospitals in 20 countries. Now, I'm a numbers guy. That comes from my epidemiology, CDC background. Numbers to me aren't everything, but numbers show the demand that has been there that we didn't expect, both in wanting the book and in the training of the conference. And I can't conclude this part without saying, and it was a team effort, because we loved upon the NICU nurses and doctors in Tanzania. We helped them to believe what was possible. I had to unlearn some of my American approach and try to figure out how to make a NICU work in Tanzania rather than try to replicate an American NICU in Africa, which is not the right approach. We had to train our doctors and nurses, and then I just let them go, and they ran with it, and it succeeded. And once it succeeded, they said, Dr. Swanson, can we put this into a book? Can we teach hospitals? And they're the doctors, my ones that are standing up and teaching. And boy, if that hasn't made me a proud father. I have watched over, if we count the hundreds of doctors and nurses that we've trained, I've just watched them go and teach in their respective hospitals and countries. And it's an amazing feeling. And that leads us to why we started the Institute for Child Healthcare Africa. You want to speak a little bit about that? Because that's our next step, is ICHA.
Jodi, before you talk about that, I do want to say to you, I'm at a loss for words. I can't even put the correct words behind all that you just said. I know that there's a lot more work to do, but so much work has been done. I think of all that you talked about, Jodi, and as I listen to you and cry, tears of sadness and great joy as to all that's been accomplished. And I listen to you, Dr. Swanson, and I cry again, tears of sadness, so much work to do, tears of great joy, all the work that's been done. Both of you are crazy humble, but crazy kingdom servant, heart-minded. When you look at all the work that's been done and all the statistics you just talked about, and I'm super excited to talk about what you established in 2023, I hope you look yourselves in the mirror, and I know you give God all the glory. Tell me you're proud. Please tell me, tell me. You've had a tremendous impact on the kingdom. I'm speaking for the listeners and the YouTube watchers. We're dumbfounded. I'm at a loss for words as to the impact that you've had in Tanzania, let alone all of Africa. And I left part of my heart in Africa. We say a huge, huge thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for saying yes to the Lord, being the hands and feet of Christ all throughout Africa. Are you proud?
Yes, but I'm also humbled by how much work
there is to
and
do.
Sobered by how much work there's left to do. Yeah, our NICU has saved 2,500 babies, maybe 3,000, and the feeding program and the training, but it's like I'm just scratching the surface because I've watched enough women lose a child. I had a 41-year-old mother 2 years ago who came into our NICU. She had lost 10 consecutive babies. On the 11th, at age 41, we saved and sent her home with her first living baby. And she said to me, "You have given me love," because she felt she would never experience the love of a mother to a child. And what we also realized is we're lifting the social stigma and the shame that is carried in a country or a region of the world where a woman loses babies. And so we do it for the mothers and the fathers, not just for the babies. We do this work for our doctors and nurses because I want to see them working in an environment that really can use their gifts. They can stretch their wings. They can feel appreciated and valued as a healthcare professional in Africa. Nurses don't have a lot of respect in many African countries. It's not as esteemed a career as it is in the United States or Europe, Canada. I want them to feel proud. I want my doctors to feel like they're accomplishing amazing things because they really are. I want them to feel like the student has passed the teacher, me being the teacher, and they already are passing me in their abilities. And that's what gives me joy in a country where there is a lot of sadness and a lot of suffering because the death of children is something that is far more common than it should be. On July 20th, I lost 4 NICU babies in one day. In one day, 4 babies died, and they were all in just one room. And it devastated our team. Our team was crying. And like Jodi with the deaths that she's experienced in the feeding program, you have to, at that point, say, allow yourself to grieve and sit in the grief and feel it. Don't harden your heart to it. But you also have to know that there's are babies waiting out there that you can save. That's why if you walked into our NICU today in Tanzania, you would see pictures of mothers and babies that I took and others took hanging up around the wall so that our team can look at the baby and go, "Oh, I remember that. He was born at 27 weeks gestation, 900 grams, and now he's a beautiful 8-year-old running around the city." You know, we fill ourselves with reminders of God's miracle babies, even as we face death rates at times that are unimaginable to those in the United States, but they're getting fewer. And we have seen a progress equally unimaginable from when we arrived in 2013. I would never have thought that there would be so many doctors and nurses trained across so many countries and so many NICU graduates that come back. I have a father who writes me every year about his daughter that we saved. This was the mother who had lost 5 babies in a row, and it was the 6th that we saved. And he has proudly announced that he has grand plans for his 5-year-old. She's now 5, and that she's going to be a neonatologist when she grows older to save African babies, just like we saved her life.
Woohoo!
Every Christmas, Dad sends me an update on his 5-year-old, soon to be a neonatologist, and I just chuckle.
On the One Pebble podcast, when something's exciting, I do a woohoo. I wanted to do that 1,000 times listening to you. I will say to you guys, it's interesting, like they talk about in the Bible, iron sharpens iron. You guys are so humble and spirit-minded for the kingdom that you're the first to say that Tanzania has been the gift to you, and you'll be the first to say that Tanzania, you haven't been the gift to Tanzania, which is amazes me to hear you both say that.
It's so true.
But I will say to you, both of you, I just know in all the different projects that you're working on, in the hospital, at the conference, in all these different projects, the doctors and nurses and staff, you have been a tremendous gift to them. You've encouraged them, the way you speak about them, Dr. Swanson, how you pull them aside, how you love on them, how you make them feel seen and known, doctors and nurses and the staff and the team. Not only are you doing the work with the pediatrics, but you'll never know your impact on the professionals that you're walking alongside. And we're so grateful. And just when you hear how busy they are and the life-saving work that they're doing, then they decide in 2023, as a husband and wife team and a professional team, they decide to establish the Institute for Child Healthcare Africa. I want to read their vision statement before I have Jodi talk about this. Their vision is to establish a continent where all children can thrive through quality health care. Jodi, tell us more about it. We're so excited about the work you're doing.
Thank you. No, when we started this work, I think the place that we were in, the 2 hospitals where we were, and mostly it's Steve's work, that was just growing and expanding. And I would often say to him, you need a team to do this. You cannot do this alone. There are more and more demands. And not just demands, opportunities to spread the work up, in the training. And in order to do that, we needed to have a bigger umbrella. We needed to be able to do this work and have an infrastructure that was going to support it so that it could expand. And much of the reason we brainstormed and thought about doing this was so that this work could continue. And also thinking about how is this going to continue when someday we won't be here? Like what is going to be left? What is going to be the future of the work? And how is it going to be sustainable? So that was a lot of the reasons for why we started this NGO. And Steve and I went away actually to a favorite place of ours in Tanzania when we started to think about our core values. What is it that we really want to do? What is really important to us? And how do we put words to this work that we are doing? And so much of it is we wanted to see children not just survive, in the hospital, not just make it through an illness, but to thrive. And what was that going to look like? And not just the sick children that came into the hospital, but how do we prevent it? How do we provide a health care that really supports children at all stages and in all capacities? So I think part of what we envision underneath this Institute of Child Healthcare Africa is looking at all the different pieces of healthcare that are needed, including like an outpatient clinic. So we're looking at starting the first freestanding pediatric clinic in Tanzania to provide for children. And part of this comes out of providing follow-up care for the NICU graduates, having a place where they are going to be able to be seen for like urgent care, on weekends. And I will say also part of the reason that this is necessary is Steve gets so many WhatsApp messages. So he is taking care of kids, not just in the clinic, not in the hospital, but everybody seems to have his phone number. So he will get messages on regular basis from people saying, my child has a fever. What do I do? And I'm saying, Steve, you can't answer every one of these messages, but they don't have a place to go.
Only about 300 messages a day.
Prior to starting this podcast, Dr. Steve said, I need to answer this phone call. It's another doctor with a question.
Yeah. No, so he's constantly on call.
People have so much reverence for both of you.
There's so few pediatricians.
Nobody can do that. But that means, think about it when you were raising your children and your child got sick. What did you do? You called the doctor. You made an appointment. And your regular pediatrician couldn't see you. But that means the other pediatrician on call could see you with your child. So you had a sick visit that day. That doesn't exist in Arusha. So many people don't have, where am I going to go with my child today? What do I do in this situation? There's not much education to the public as well. You go to your pediatrician, they say for your well child checkup, right? And you get your vaccines, and then they say, now what you're going to be learning or what you're going to be seeing with your child in this next year will be this, this, this. If you have this, this is. So there's education. You as a mom are educated. That doesn't exist in Arusha. It doesn't exist in Tanzania. So many people don't know what to do in a particular situation because they have never been educated. And so this will allow us to provide a different level of care for children in Arusha. And I'm hoping we'll also offload some of Steve's work. But at this point, what's really exciting is Steve has spent so much time educating and training different doctors in pediatrics, but also we've had the opportunity to send them for training. So we've sent a number of Steve's young physicians to Uganda. 3 of them were trained there. 2 of them, one just finished in South Africa or is finishing. Another will be finishing soon to become pediatricians. And through there, we have 2, 3, how many
through Kenya.
In Kenya? All of these physicians now trained in pediatrics are able to come back in as young doctors, and Steve can work as a consultant with them to raise them up to be this next generation of pediatricians to serve. So it's just expanding the touch, right? So Steve, who has all this knowledge as a pediatrician, now we have been able to send these young doctors out. They come back fully trained, and he can continue to work with them so that one day when we are gone and no longer working there, how many more have now filled his shoes? And that's exactly what we need to do to raise capacity.
There's been about a dozen, and many of them are lovely, amazing.
They are so wonderful. You could have your own podcast with each one of them.
I could give you a podcast on just amazing female Tanzanian doctors. But
it's wonderful.
Let's opportunity. Do it. And I'll say to you guys, what you're doing with the Institute, that's just one example, is amazing. It's remarkable. For that to live on, as
education
you say,
is the key.
Education is the key. Give the listeners a call to action in a couple different ways. How can they consider financially giving to the work that you're doing? And also, we want to hear from both of you as to any personal prayer requests you have, professional prayer requests. I think it's obvious from listening the last hour and a half as to, again, so much work has been done. You should be incredibly proud. We can't imagine the 12 years that you've put in, but so much work is left to be done. Mm-hmm. Give us a call to action as to how people can consider giving personal and professional prayer requests that you have.
So we have 3 big projects that are going to be the next 3 to 5 years. One of them is at the Institute for Child Healthcare Africa. Tanzanians call it ICHA, I-C-H-A, is going to be partnering with our existing hospital to be running the neonatal intensive care unit and the entire Department of Pediatrics. So we're coming in as an international organization now, and the hospital is seconding the work of the pediatric NICU department, which I started, to this organization. Secondly, is we're going to start the Arusha Pediatric and Maternity Center. So this is the outpatient clinic that Jodi referred to that will base many of our doctors. And we're going to be doing obstetrics there as well. So from conception through the end of high school. And the third area is the education mission, which comes in the form of Tiny Feet, Big Steps neonatology conferences. We're doing one in Ethiopia this year, in addition to Tanzania. And next year we're on pace to do one in Uganda and in Ghana, West Africa. So we're growing the conferences, and with that, we're sponsoring doctors for more and more training. We need funds. At the end of the day, we have salaries to pay. I pay my entire NICU nurse and physician team all of their salaries. The hospital doesn't have the revenues, so I pay the salaries from funds that we raise. We need to purchase equipment, pediatric examining beds, monitors, medicines. There's always babies whose families can only pay a portion of the bed fee. And even though we reduce costs everywhere, in an economy in a country where most people earn only $3 to $4 a day, even if our costs are very low, it's more than some families can afford. So we've always had a charitable fund to allow mothers and fathers to bring their child and get care for without turning them away because they don't have money. I don't believe a baby's survival should depend on the pocketbook of the parents. We ask parents to contribute out of respect and dignity, and we cover the differences. So we need funds for equipment, for training, to run NICU, to pay salaries, to give charitable gifts to families that are hospitalized, their children. And the way that can be done is through the 501c3 that we started. It's called Institute for Child Healthcare Africa, and the web address is just ichafrica.org. And then there's a donate page, and people will get it. It's all tax deductible donations. That goes into a pool of funds from which Jodi and I will be supporting our salaries as workers in Africa, as well as paying for all of these ventures that we're doing, all of these projects.
We also have to raise funds to help support some of the education of the doctors.
Yeah.
You want to speak to them?
So when doctors and nurses go for training in Africa, they don't actually get a salary. In America, if you want to go to residency to train to be a surgeon, a radiologist, a cardiologist, or a pediatrician, you collect a residency salary. It's the opposite in Africa. You pay the hospital
to train there.
To train, because they're training, you pay them, plus you have to cover all your living expenses. So I can train a Tanzanian doctor to become a neonatologist for about $50,000, but I have to raise that money. So all of the doctors that we've sent away, the 10 to 12 over the past years for residency training, whether in Kenya, Uganda, or South Africa, I send them out of Tanzania because the training is stronger out of Tanzania. All of them, I have to essentially raise the funds for their training. And that's actually one of the great joys for me, because I know that without a sponsor, they would never be a pediatrician. And because of my sponsorship of them, boy, the loyalty is so high that all of them to date have come back to work with me. None have stayed in the country of their training. They want to work with ICHA. So people can support us through the website. There's options for PayPal and Venmo and other options with credit card payment. Jodi and I are pivoting away from the organization we've worked with the last 12 years, which has been the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, through whom we previously received our mission salary. And now we're coming under Christian Health Service Corps, which is a new organization, newer, that is sending long-term medical missionaries. and we will raise our direct salary support for our cost of living in Africa through ICHA. Prayer requests.
Well, I'm sure people can use their imagination and figure out some of these, one of which would be strength, resilience, flexibility, patience, wisdom. Maybe one of the ways also to pray is for just our physical health, and but I think wisdom and discernment. There are so many opportunities, as you can see, when you move forward, and we need discernment to know what is the next step that we need to take, because there are so many needs out in front of us. Where's the next place that we, put our foot? What is the next step the Lord wants us to take? Because the vision is big and the demands are great. And so we need qualified workers to work with us, especially in things like accounting, management, establishing business plan.
If any of the people listening to this podcast are retired pediatric clinic nurses or retired pediatricians, clinic managers,
hospital administrator, if you're out there.
And they are open to come and volunteer for an extended period of time, not a 2-week trip, because that doesn't help us, but maybe a 6-month trip. We would put them to use in loving on, mentoring, and helping us develop and grow. For example, the Arusha Pediatric and Maternity Center. We know that clinic's going to explode and grow faster than we're going to be able to accommodate it from a business model. The other thing we really need prayer for is just good relationships with the Tanzanian local government authorities, with the Ministry of Health, with the government of Tanzania. Everything about our work in Tanzania is based on relationships. Africa is a communal culture. It's a relational culture. People don't reply readily to emails. They don't do Zoom calls easily, but it's all face-to-face meetings. That's how things happen.
Face-to-face over a cup of tea.
Over a cup of tea. And so good relationships on every level of both local church officials, the hospitals that we are partnering with, the many hospitals, and especially the government officials and the Ministry of Health really makes a difference. That can smooth your way quickly. Conversely, it can block you. And so good relationships are important. And thankfully for our board of directors in Tanzania are all Tanzanians, and they're very well connected, and they help with navigating that landscape in a way that a white missionary doctor from the United States could never understand. We rely heavily on the wisdom and the insight of our African colleagues in the work that we're doing.
As I listen to you, it's hard for me to choose my words today. The reason is it brings me so much joy, as I've said, the work that you've done. I look at you too. I'm crazy proud. I'm so proud. On behalf of the listeners, the YouTube watchers, I know what everyone's thinking. They're amazed, remarkable, grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your hearts to serve, the kingdom work that you've done, and you're so incredibly humble. We couldn't be more proud of you. Thank you on behalf of everyone. But I also think to myself, I'm excited, God willing, when you come back to the U.S. again, we're going to sit down. I have 100 more questions that we didn't get to today. And so we want to hear from you again. In the show notes, we're going to put all of this and put the website for people to get in contact with you. As you said, doctors, nurses, medical staff, if you're out there, get in contact with these two. Prayer warriors, please continue to pray and do pray for the Swansons. We invite people to possibly get behind you and give. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you for sharing. We're excited about your kids. I'm so excited that you bought those 3 dogs.
I know.
Thank you for buying the dogs and moving to Tanzania. But on a sincere note, you'll never know the ripples of your work. You'll never be able to measure the impact that you've had. As I started, you two were raised in homes where the model was, we're going to fulfill the Great Commission. And that's what you've helped to do. Please rest well, knowing that you're helping to fulfill the Great Commission. God is glorified and honored and delighted in the work of both of you and your family. For the listeners, well, today you've inspired us. You've encouraged us. You've educated us like crazy. So we should be continuing to encourage you. But on the One Pebble podcast, we allow the guests to throw out the last pebble of encouragement to the listeners. And when we think of in general fulfilling the Great Commission, when I think of you two, probably the first word that comes to mind is courageous. What would you tell the listeners or the YouTube watchers as they hear your story? They may or may not be called to Tanzania, but they might be wondering their next pebble, what they're going to do, what they're going to toss in Green Lake, the pond, the ocean to cause ripples. What words of encouragement or last pebble do you want the listeners to hear from your hearts today? No pressure.
What comes to my mind is something that I think the world needs now. I'm often troubled by things and events happening in the world. And I think one of our guiding verses in the Bible is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And so if I were to leave one pebble, I would ask people to do justice. Do what is right. Care for the poor. Don't forget them. Care for the poor. Love them. And wherever you are in your world, do justice. That would be my word.
Years ago, in one of my annual reports that I do for the neonatal intensive care unit, I put the tagline, a NICU is a place where heaven bends to meet human frailty. And I like that image of heaven bending to meet human frailty. I believe that we serve a God that cares for the little ones, for the little things, for things that grow. I love things that grow, whether it's in a garden or in the animal kingdom or human beings or a child's heart. God cares about human frailty. He cares about things that grow. He bends to meet that. So find a way to embrace that. Frailty is not weakness in the kingdom of God. It is strength.
Beautiful words. Dr. Steve and Jodi Swanson, it's been a great joy. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. We are extremely grateful for both of you, your family, the work that you're doing. God's richest blessings to both of you. Thank you.
And can I say thank you very much for having us on your show and for encouraging us, because it really means a lot to us that you asked us to be here, but also that you genuinely are proud of us. That is a great encouragement to me. So thank you.
I'm proud of you too. And those words are from the bottom of my heart. This has meant the world to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the One Pebble Podcast. One pebble, so many ripples. What will you do to make a difference?